Lesson 16. I have no neutral thoughts. The idea for today is a beginning step in dispelling the belief that your thoughts have no effect. Everything you see is the result of your thoughts. There is no exception to this fact. Thoughts are not big or little, powerful or weak. They are merely true or false. Those that are true create their own likeness. Those that are false make theirs. There is no more self-contradictory concept than that of idle thoughts. What gives rise to the perception of a whole world can hardly be called idle. Every thought you have contributes to truth or to illusion. Either it extends the truth or it multiplies illusions. You can indeed multiply nothing, but you will not extend it by doing so. Besides your recognizing that thoughts are never idle, salvation requires that you also recognize that every thought you have brings either peace or war, either love or fear. A neutral result is impossible, because a neutral thought is impossible. There is such a temptation to dismiss fear thoughts as unimportant, trivial, and not worth bothering about, that it is essential you recognize them all as equally destructive, but equally unreal. You will practice this idea in many forms before you really understand it. In applying the idea for today, search your mind for a minute or so with eyes closed, and actively seek not to overlook any little thought that may tend to elude the search. This is quite difficult until you get used to it. You will find that it is still hard for you not to make artificial distinctions. Every thought that occurs to you, regardless of the qualities that you assign to it, is a suitable subject for applying today's idea. I have no neutral thoughts. In the practice periods, first repeat the idea to yourself, I have no neutral thoughts, and then as each one crosses your mind, hold it in awareness while you tell yourself, this thought about blank is not a neutral thought. That thought about blank is not a neutral thought. As usual, use today's idea whenever you are aware of a particular thought that arouses uneasiness. The following form is suggested for this purpose. This thought about blank is not a neutral thought because I have no neutral thoughts. 4 or 5 practice periods are recommended if you find them relatively effortless. If strain is experienced, 3 will be enough. The length of the exercise period should also be reduced if there is discomfort. So again, for a minute or so, you repeat the idea, I have no neutral thoughts. And then as each thought crosses our mind, saying this thought about is not a neutral thought.
It's a very interesting lesson today. Because we heard a lot about looking at our thoughts. But we also heard a lot about our thoughts don't mean anything. Don't believe your thoughts. Jesus is saying in this lesson that there is such a temptation to dismiss fear thoughts as unimportant, trivial, and not worth bothering about. That it is essential you recognize them all as equally destructive, but equally unreal. There is such a temptation to dismiss fear thoughts as unimportant, trivial, and not worth bothering about. So it's important to recognize the temptation to dismiss fear thoughts. It's important to start to see all fear thoughts, since fear thoughts actually make up the world. There's no other source to the world you live in than your own fear thoughts. So wouldn't that be an important task to actually see them? He's saying it's such a temptation to dismiss them, that it is essential you recognize them all as equally destructive, but also equally unreal. But first we need to see them, to be able to see that they are equally destructive, and then experience that they are equally unreal. That's why we practice the lesson, I have no neutral thoughts. And the idle thoughts. It's an interesting thing too. The mind wanders around, thinking about this and that, forms, future, past, worries. That's idle thoughts. But he's saying it's a contradictory concept. Idle thoughts. What gives rise to the perception of the whole world can hardly be called idle. Because these thoughts seem idle, but they aren't, because they give rise to the world that you experience. If you're bored, if you think this world doesn't work, if your experience isn't happy, you don't get what you want, it's hard, it's heavy, it's boring, it's because of the idle thoughts. Every thought you have contributes to truth or to illusion. Either it extends the truth or it multiplies illusions. You can indeed multiply nothing, but you will not extend it by doing so. I think he means by that you can increase the confusion by the thoughts, by the idle thoughts. You can even make the world worse, in a sense, in your experience, by carrying on with not being aware of these thoughts. But you will not extend it by doing so. It can't be shared. So it's interesting, it's just good to know that there is a temptation to dismiss fear thoughts. First of all, it's good to know that. It's a temptation to dismiss fear thoughts as unimportant. And to be willing to not follow that temptation, but to actually see them. To start to acknowledge what is deep there in the unconscious. To start to explore the mind, really. even patterns, behavior, reactions in certain situations. If you recognize you feel uncomfortable, you may just run off and avoid the situation, but it's gold to see it, to see when it's fear driving. To see them as destructive, but also unreal, is what he's encouraging us. We will practice this idea in many forms before you really understand it. I mean, I feel like I practiced this for 18 years in many forms. And I am starting to go deeper and see the fear thoughts, actually. So, yeah, it's very good. Very, very helpful. Don't overlook any little thoughts. And use today's idea, I have no neutral thoughts. Whenever you're aware of particular thoughts that arouses uneasiness, when you do feel uneasiness, use it in this form, this thought about, and really name it. Pin it out, find it in the mind. What is the uneasiness? This thought about this uneasiness is not a neutral thought, because I have no neutral thoughts. So it's really like helping us to see that we do believe we have idle thoughts, and we can have idle thoughts. We believe we can have, but these thoughts don't mean anything to us. They don't do anything to our experience, but oh, they do. So it is to really invite this. Oh, I really want to see them. Like it's a very good practice. It's a very, very. There is no better use of your time, moment by moment, to see all the thoughts. 4 or 5 practice periods is recommended if you find it relatively effortless. If strain is experienced, 3 will be enough. But I feel like we practice mind watching all the time, you know. But we can also sit down and do this extra, you know. Like that is very helpful, like we talked about before, to have reminders on your phone to actually do the lessons. The way Jesus recommends. Because that's another way of avoiding looking at thoughts, is to avoid following the instructions. I remember when I first did the lessons, I was so diligent. If I was out driving, I would stop the car, park, and do the lesson at the time I needed to do it. It was very good. I remember one time our whole family was going to some outing. I was sitting in the back seat and my sister was driving, and I just did the lesson because that was what I needed to do. And I thought, they think I'm weird. I'm sitting here with my closed eyes and they try to talk to me, but I thought, I'm going to do the lesson. So that was, everything else felt meaningless. It has paid off to be that diligent, actually. But to not feel it as an oppression, or, you know, to feel it as a gift. You give yourself some space. That's the way to see it.
I need to put a log on.
Okay.
Lift it.
I have to lift it?
Yeah.
It's tricky.
You know the vent. You know the thing we slide.
Yeah.
That if you can pull that down and then lift it over it, lift the door over that. You know that's what's catching it.
Maybe not
Use-
push it. I don't know. I don't try.
It's tricky.
See this, Peter? I use this just to
Okay.
pull down and then try and lift it over.
Okay.
There you go. Teamwork.
Yeah.
What was that?
Teamwork.
Push down that little pipe.
Yeah,
I think.
the slider, the vent.
Tricky.
Oh, okay. I haven't
Maybe
had
it
that
is.
before.
If it is in a certain position, then it doesn't matter. No neutral thoughts.
I'm going to just go and put my fingers into some water. I just touched the glass.
Oh, okay.
momentarily.
Yeah. Maybe you bring a mug with cold water.
Yeah.
A mug.
Yeah, to keep your
Keep it.
finger in.
Okay.
So can we apply today's lesson to this?
Yeah. Yeah, I think their interpretation of it is that this was a nice collaboration. It was joining, it was communication.
But sometimes I really like that lesson. I
Yeah.
can see how helpful
Yeah,
it can be, and it is. But sometimes I am convinced we do have neutral thoughts though. Like, you know, Peter just went to the kitchen to get water. Or, you know, the thought I'm going to the kitchen to get water. That's neutral. You know, it's not a fearful thought, it's not a happy thought, it's just... I know it's not really necessary to apply the lesson to that, but yeah, it feels like a neutral thought. Though.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And you will eventually feel like you're the dreamer of the dream.
Mm.
You will just see that it's not really real or really happening. It's a dream.
Yeah, okay, okay. So they're all unreal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because yeah,
Yeah, I see.
they're
Yeah.
equally unreal.
Just landed there for me, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's okay, is it okay to express?
Yeah.
No? Yeah. I mean, normally I just wouldn't do anything about it, probably. I was about to do that, and I thought, no, I need to go and just take care of it. There's something that came up around the film and this morning. It's like I just... Sitting with David for 5 hours, watching a film. It's happened before here. When when I did it at home, I would have a speaker and I'd take the speaker and I could go to the toilet and I could keep him with me. I would just go when he was speaking and not when the film was on, so I didn't lose the visual. Or I'd even get something to eat. But I just couldn't stay with it. I could feel things, I could see them here, but there was this sort of something here. And I particularly heard Micah laughing at the film, and I could see myself amused down here, but this other place was dull. And I felt quite dark about it. And you said you can go and have a break, and that felt really difficult. Bit like this, like actually standing up and putting a log in. Could I do that in the meditation? Probably not appropriate, but I could, but I don't want to. I feel fearful to do that, say. I was sort of looking at this darkness. I woke up with it this morning and just really kind of depressed. It's just an area of depression. And what came was a challenge. If it's a challenge, it's like how much I've been motivated by challenges rather than by inspiration. And initially I went into, oh my God, everything is just a challenge. And although that has been predominant, especially when I was younger, I know that's not true. I know that I am also touched by inspiration. However, that challenge is, we were talking about competition around learning Spanish when we were out. So the last few days I've just done one lesson, not anymore. And so my participation has gone down because I could definitely see I was into competing with the machine, with nominal people who are also doing it, getting different number of points. Very familiar to me. So it sort of almost swings from full-on challenge, adrenaline rush, to nothing, and that's my fear, I think. I'll do nothing. But I heard your commitment to face the competition with an element in it, in yourself. And I went, okay. So I didn't, as a competition, react to that, respond to that, but I could feel that this was something. We spoke about it, and I got into quite a lot of fear around speaking. It's connected with getting it right and doing the right thing. I should. It's really obviously a big thing that's going to come out here when you have function and meetings and stuff. Let alone our relationship, how I should be.
So, I don't know, I just feel to share a new view. Share a new view of this. Like, what if? So we have heard that the world is just in your own mind. The challenge is in your own mind. So what if your challenge is just actually about finding or experiencing the spirit in every moment, and making the moments in themselves, because you have ordered them. You have thought it's better to watch David than to go and rest. It's better to have better turnout points in the Spanish practice than to have less. But what if the challenge isn't that? It's to experience, to forgive and invite peace of mind.
Yeah. I know that's the truth. I think I've been endeavouring to do that. Especially when you call it being in the moment, I relate to that. But there are some, that still attachment to development, improving myself. Some way of seeing that. It's the same with this learning Spanish. The competition seems to be an aid to helping to do more.
Yeah.
But it's not helpful for the inner journey,
No.
So, it's not. So that's a low. It's like, it's like. So there's a place there which I give a higher importance to, and this resting, or giving to myself in that obvious way, or not. Although I was really feeling the connection, it was like the word family came up for me sitting here this morning, and so the obviously the unworthiness comes up, and yet, it seems obvious to listen to David and watch the film would be very worthy, and yet actually I probably over-focused as well to begin with. That came into my mind. I was trying to be very present, and then I just got tired and I didn't really want to stay. I hardly ever then go. It's like enormous obstacle there somehow. It's like I've got to endure, struggle, try harder, whatever it is, any of those, the above. It's just like some sort of it's like going and getting water from my finger. You need to lie down. What do you need to lie down for?
Harsh against yourself. It's almost a competition against yourself too.
Competition against myself. You say, yeah, that feels true, definitely. I stimulated myself in sports all the time, just by pushing.
Jesus is strongly warning us about the competition idea.
Yeah.
He's saying that don't underestimate your need to be vigilant against the idea of competition, because all your conflicts come from it.
Yeah.
All your conflicts.
Yeah.
So even the inner competition, arise conflict. It is the belief that conflicting interests are possible, and therefore you have accepted the impossible as true. Is that different from saying you perceive yourself as unreal? So the possibility that conflicting interests are possible. It's the idea of competition. Conflicting interests. There would be different interests, not just peace of mind.
Yeah. Listening to the wisdom of a teacher, learning through a film, just seeing what arises versus just just following the prompt to go and just rest.
Yeah.
Rest in God.
Yeah. So some kind of intellectual effort has been in there to choose
Yeah.
what is right, the ordering
There's
of
definitely
activity. And,
yeah.
yeah.
And that sense of depression was really important this morning. I could see that's been on through my life, through this efforting, or whatever we call that.
Yeah. At the same time, I mean, you can give yourself to it, and because it's beautiful prayer, you want to let it teach you. You want to get clear. There is a strong drive that is beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's there too, and it can help you shift your mind. It's not like staying, leaving. Either of them is the right thing. It's more, you did stay, so that must have been the right thing, you know. It's not to make it wrong. And it can also be used. I've experienced that a lot of times, because the ego is uncomfortable around hearing the truth, the teachings. So at times to have a strong intention to stay and get through that resistance, that can also happen. So it's not anything right or wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a massive journey around David with these retreats. So I did them for about 3 years. And they were a central feature. And I learnt in a very visceral way about non-duality, in a way that actually started to bypass my intellect through reading and stuff. And I found that really helpful. And then speaking in the retreats was just desperate struggle. And this place would come up, I'd compete with myself. But it did teach me to, I realized each time I was, next time I'm going to speak, I'm going to manage it somehow, and then I would go into a cycle of self-hate. But it did teach me to rest in God more, rather than, I could see that this was arising. But I still this place of unworthiness, this struggle against that, with that, fighting with that. Okay, that's helpful.
I know you have worked a lot on that.
Well, you say that, and then at this moment I'm going like, when I surfaced it, I couldn't really see it.
You have, for the 3 years we have worked together, however long it is, you have talked about this many times, and you have allowed yourself in my sessions to speak. You talk about this. So yeah, you have been facing it.
And it's been more recently on the retreats, just before the retreat, since I come back from Denmark, those episodes where it was so intense. And I like, the others were still quite distant. Or sometimes there was an acute part I could see, but these episodes were really, really intense and really in my face. And I felt good about that, because this has felt like an enemy I can't see. I'm fighting. Wow, that's very revealing. That's it, really. That's the drive. be worthy. Yeah. I mean, it's obvious, but I can feel it right now. So it's like, I can see that. Thank you. It's really been helpful. I feel really upset somewhere. Not so upset that I'm totally beside myself, but I do feel really upset.
Well, you cannot judge your advances from your retreats. You can't really determine what this means.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for reading that piece. We did that recently in the lesson, one of the lessons. Like all conflict or struggle rises from competition. I remember reading that at the time and going, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The message of equality in there. Only equals are at peace. Because God's equal sons have everything, they cannot compete. Yet if they perceive any of their brothers as anything other than their perfect equals, the idea of competition has entered their minds. Don't underestimate your need to be vigilant against this idea, because all your conflicts come from it. The belief that conflicting interests are possible. There would be a belief that there are unequals.
Yeah, I've been pretty passionate about politics in this life, and I can now see it's impossible to find a system that will equalise a system out there, you know.
The world, yeah. Only the system of forgiveness.
Yeah, yeah.
Going within.
Yeah.